I've got a pretty crazy story, so buckle your seatbelts here. I'm going to go through kind of a trip down memory lane and some good and some not so good. And, you always see people up here in the suits looking successful. I was right where you were at just a few years ago, wondering, am I ever going to do this thing? Am I going to be successful with this? And what I want to talk to you about tonight is, how I went from my life supporting my business to my business supporting my life. And I've talked to a few of you here in the last couple days that are trying to get out of training and truly be a business owner. So that's what we're going to talk about here tonight. And one of our core values is taking personal responsibility. And that's my whole life history is I'm responsible for where I'm at, for the things that have happened, for my business, so on and so forth. And so that's what we're going to touch on here. What this basically says is we come to these motivational seminars and these teachings and these trainings, and we're around successful people and we're put in this environment, and we walk out of here and we're going to tear things up. Man, we're going to change, we're going to implement, we're going to do all the things that NPE teaches us to do. And then what typically happens, 60 to 90 days later, we get back in the cycle of life and mediocrity comes back in. And, Monday turns into Tuesday, turns into Friday, turns into, it's another year that went by and nothing really happened. And that's where I sat last year. I was Member of the Year finalist in 2009, and then I sat here in 2010 and I watched, I remember Jeff and Vern Gauthier, former competitive bodybuilders, and I was watching their stories, and I was like, man, what's wrong with me? I left here, and I had all these dreams and goals and everything wrote down, and why didn't I implement this stuff? What's going on? And it all comes back to who you're surrounding yourself with, the environment you're putting yourself in. So last year when I left, I wrote down these goals. I was going to go back to the basics. These were the things that I were going to do. This wasn't my goals. This was what I was going to do. I was going to submit my numbers every single month, no matter what. I was going to be on every single phone call. I was going to get completely out of training and not get sucked back in no matter what. Even if I had to go into debt, I wasn't going to go back into training so I could build the business. And I was going to plan every day in advance, and I was going to take massive action no matter what the cost. I was sold out and I was ready to go forward. And here was some of the results. September 2010, which was just a little over a year and a month ago, I'd gross about $8,200 net, anywhere from $3,000 to $4,000, depending on where things were at. And then what happened in October is when I took this massive action, I stepped out, and I basically stepped out of the way of myself and let the business take off because I had already been pouring into these people. I had just been holding them back because I wasn't willing to give up control and do the things necessary for the business to really grow. And you can see how it was just a rocket ship ride all the way to April of 2011. 7 months, I went from grossing $8,000 to $40,000, which is 5 times, okay? And netted 5 times what I did 7 months ago as well, which is, a huge change and not a huge business. I have a personal training boot camp and operate under another facility and some nutritional supplements and so forth. So there's 7 trainers and myself and an admin. So we accomplished a lot in a short period of time. Then human nature kicks in and we end up taking our foot off the gas because things are going so well. You got so much momentum going, you think that's going to carry forward forever. At least that's what we think anyway. So May, things started to regress, and I knew they were going to, and I could see it coming, sitting here in the VIP training in June, but momentum had already shifted the other way, and I couldn't stop this thing. But then we got back on track, got refocused. So I'm a transparent person, so I want to show you the reality of life. It's not always, just a rocket ship ride straight to the top. There's going to be things that go on in your life and things that happen where there's going to be some ups and downs and so forth. So, things have balanced out now and just super excited about our future. Built my whole business basically off challenges. Body Balance Challenge, this 24-day challenge that we've talked about before. Ran a lot of other campaigns that NPE has as well. But what I really want to talk about is what happened with me. How did this change and this transformation happen? So it hopefully gives some people some inspiration and encouragement to take the same steps. I had to shift my mindset from being an employee to a business owner. And that's kind of an address change, but it all goes on up here. Changing from doing tasks every day to actually, working on the business, which is what they talk about all the time, and you hear it, but you don't hear it. That's the big difference. And I had to focus on building people and building systems to support the growth and the things that we had to do rather than completing these tasks. And I began to start helping my staff reach their goals. Zig Ziglar always says, if you help enough other people get what they want, you'll get what you want. And that's what I did, is I started pouring into those guys, figuring out where they wanted to go and how that aligned in the business, and it made a huge difference. And I learned to empower my staff and, again, take the reins off, because I thought I was the best at everything. Camille and I used to wrestle back and forth over the phone, and I said, I got to be out there every morning at 5 a.m. or at 6 a.m. for boot camp, because otherwise the campers are going to leave, because I'm the man. And finally she said, yeah, you're the best boot camp instructor ever. Now get out of the boot camps and let somebody else do it. Train them how to do it, basically. And I was like, all right. So I listened to her. But here was a typical day in my life. At 4:30, wake up. 5:40 a.m., it's off to the races. Head out to boot camp, and then basically from 6 a.m. until 7:30 at night, they're all tasks, trading hours for dollars. And that was my whole life, and that's how I did things. But here was the reality of what was really going on. I'm leaving work before my wife and my kids get up. And I used to kid myself. I'd pull out of the driveway and I'd say, they're safe in bed because I'm out providing a lifestyle for them. But see, they wanted my time. Not just quality time, but quantity time. And I'd get home after supper, and my wife, she wasn't happy with that at all. And we'd have a lot of discussions, let's just call it that, about, where my priorities were at. And I'd always say, hey, I just got to push a little bit harder. I'll get ahead eventually here. I'd play with my kids, who I said were the most important thing, but my actions were proving different. I'd spend about an hour with them at night. But here was the honest truth. I was average at everything I was doing because I was trying to do everything and be everything. So I was an average husband, I was an average dad, I was an average trainer and business owner. And at the end of the week, like I said, I was just trying to push harder and put the pedal to the metal, because eventually I thought I would get over this hump, but you never do. And what I had is a JOB, they call it a just over broke, that owned me, and that's where I was at. So then somewhere in here, Sean and I had a call, and anytime you've been on the other end of the line with Sean, he asks you, you're talking and filling up space because you're nervous, because he's going to ask you all these hard questions. And finally he stops me and he says, hey, hold up. He said, tell me what your life looks like 3 to 5 years down the road. And blah, 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 blah. I just started blah, 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 because I didn't know. I just started making up all this stuff, and I didn't have direction. And here's one thing I want you to realize is most of us, we overestimate what we're going to do in 1 year. And we underestimate what we can accomplish in 5 years. So remember that, this 5-year thing and what a person really can accomplish. I didn't realize it at the time, but I was developing the mindset to be able to handle where NPE was trying to take me down the road. I didn't see where they were taking me, but they saw it, and they knew that I had to develop along the way for the next 5 years. But I realized I really needed clarity on where I was at. And to gain this clarity, I had to sit down and take a look at how far I'd come. And I really had to cut myself some slack, because I'm a perfectionist, so I'm always really hard on myself. If things aren't, just perfect and going great, I'll beat myself down about it. And then fear comes in, and then you're afraid to move and move forward. So again, I sat down and I really reflected on the person that I was before. These are back in my bodybuilding days. I was a national champion bodybuilder back in 2001. But here's the deal. When I started out talking, I said we put ourselves in these environments with people, and we become who we surround ourselves with, okay? And I'm going to tell you a little of my history, my background, where I've come from, to let you know how far I've really came. When I put myself in the environment of where I was at, anything possible, I was trying to become a professional bodybuilder at all costs. I didn't have a moral compass in my life, to gauge the standards and the things that I was doing. Got into taking anabolic steroids. That was a way to get into Muscle and Fitness and Flex magazine. And I knew that I had to do that to compete at that level, because that's who I was surrounding myself with. Ended up selling drugs, became a drug dealer. And here's the deal. Long and short story, this is my wilderness experience. November 20th of 2001, I was on top of the world. Making a great income, selling drugs, Had the Harley, had the house, had the girl, had the money in my pocket, had everything, the success of the world that I was looking for, went into this wilderness experience because God picked me up out of my situation and he said, you know what? I've given you gifts and talents, but you're using them for your own personal benefit to bring glory to you rather than to bring glory to me. Picked me up out of here. I'm up in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. The guy that sets me up is from Orlando, Florida, of all places. Just the most ironic thing in the world. Every time I fly down here, I just have flashbacks. I mean, if NP couldn't have been like up in North Carolina where Eric was at or whatever. But, this was a time period where lost absolutely everything that I had. My wife now and I had just gotten engaged. She stuck with me by the grace of God and had nothing else. You can see my release date, November 15th of 2005. And this is where I was at. I use this, you never know where you're going to go in 5 years. 5.5 years ago, this is where I was at. Living in the in-laws' basement. It was my wife and my 3-year-old. I was making $10 an hour at the gym, training, working about 20 hours a week there. My first week, I trained 1 hour for free. And I'm like, how's this going to work out? I'm not making hardly any money. That's the old beater car there that I used to drive. That's not the exact one. The one I had duct tape around the back and so forth. And that was very humbling because I was on top of the world before, and now it was like everything come crashing down. But it was the best thing that ever happened to me, because it taught me about perseverance and working and so on and so forth. But I remember standing in the garage, and I think it was Eric Ruth that had wrote something about taking the pole position in your area, become the expert. And so I'm sitting there with my cell phone. I trained one person for free that week, and I was like, okay, this is it. And I picked the thing up, and I said, you've reached the voicemail of Randy Hartz, the Sioux Falls fitness expert. And I just saw myself there, and I created that. And I look back at what was my motivation, what was my drive and to accomplish all this in the last 5 years from going from having absolutely nothing to turning this around. The three on the far right, that's my 8, 4, and 2-year-old. I always said, I want to be the one out yelling at them when they're playing flag football and stuff. I want to be the coach. But see, my life was supporting my business rather than my business supporting my life, so I was so sucked into that, I didn't have time for what I said was important. That's my wife. She's an absolute champion. And I'm standing up here and I'm telling you that you truly can have everything. You can have a successful business. You can have a successful marriage and be a successful parent and have a strong spiritual life. You can have it all. It just sometimes takes a little bit longer doing it the right way. This was a trip we were able to take just a few months ago in June down to the VIP training. I hadn't taken a trip in over 10 years. And my wife, that's my 8-year-old there, my wife was always told, someday you're going to be able to do this. Someday we're going to go to Disney. She was told that by her grandparents and her parents, and I started telling her that stuff. And finally, I was like, someday's got to come now. And Camellia forced me to take this vacation. We paid cash for it just because of all the things that NP has done for me. And my wife had a lot better time on this trip than actually my son. My son thought the pool at the resort was the best part. You know how that goes with an 8-year-old. But here's the real thing. You take 6 years later. This was just a week ago. This was Fellowship of Christian Athletes has this thing called the Fields of Faith. And what they do is they usually go out on football fields, and this place is about 5.5 hours from where I work, or from where I live in Iowa. And this guy put this event together, and my wife and I were able to travel down there, and we were able to share our testimonies and share our stories because we have very powerful testimonies and what God's done in our lives, and we're able to really relate to young people and hopefully chart their destiny and their course in a different direction. But you see, just a year ago, there's no way that I could have taken 2 days off and been able to go down there and share with these young people because I would have been missing out on the finances that came into the business as well as paying money out to be able to go there. And some of you guys are in that right now. Here's my keys to success. First of all, you need to define what you want. Second of all, create a plan. Third of all, surround yourself with people who will help you get there. We are who we surround ourselves. You're in a perfect environment. It's just continuing to go forward. And then fourth of all, it's time to go get it, to go get some, to take massive action. I'm going to leave you with this. If you don't quit, you win. A guy, I heard him say one time, he said, the first time that you quit something, it's the hardest thing that you'll ever do. It'll eat at you. It'll tear you up inside. and it'll just make you physically almost nauseous. The second time you quit, it gets a little bit easier. And, you can stomach it a little better, and it's not as hard as the first time. But the third time you quit, that's what you are as a quitter. And you see, when you get hooked up with NPE, they see where you're going, not where you've been. They don't care where you've been at. They take and evaluate, this is the starting point, and everybody starts fresh. And no matter what you've done up to this point, on Monday morning, it's game on, and it's time to move forward. I appreciate your time, and I appreciate you listening to my story. God bless.